Welcome to the Diversity Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Julie Kratz. I am thrilled you are here with us today. Our purpose is to share stories, ideas, and tools to help you on your diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. Let's meet this week's guest. Welcome back. It's so good to be with you all, and thank you for your continued feedback as we go down the mini-sode series on hot topics we're hearing about in the workplace around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So this week's subject that we're going to take a deeper dive into was quite controversial. So I posted this article on LinkedIn last month and got a lot of comments, a lot of likes, but it also felt very polarizing for folks. And the subject was Stop Expecting Marginalized Groups to Lead Diversity Efforts. It's time for allies to step up and put in the work. So here's the thing. What we know is that marginalized groups are often being overtasked with leading diversity work, which is driving burnout. We know that the average tenure for a DEI person is less than 2 years, so a lot lower than for other positions. And we also have data to show the number one reason for folks leaving these jobs is burnout. So how do we avoid this? What are some strategies? If organizations have shown deeper commitments to diversity work, especially in the last couple years, and they've even spent money on it, maybe created a strategy around it, have DEI goals and plans, which are definitely best practices. We know that the representation numbers are stagnant at best. We are still not seeing much movement at all of women, people of color, those with disabilities, LGBTQ+, etc., represented in those mid to high level management positions. And so the front lines, fairly diverse representation for most organizations and industries. The problem is at the top. And so DEI leaders come in, they're tasked with recruiting, hiring, addressing biases, education, strategy, goals, and that's a lot to take on to solve centuries of inequality in an organization that might be newer to this area. And we found the 3 key reasons why this is not working. When we overtax marginalized groups that didn't create the problems that they're being adversely affected by, they're overtaxed with leading this work. About 80% of DEI folks inside organizations have intersectional identities, and most of those are women of color. Certainly, there are other identities represented there, but primarily women of color have been leading the way, and they're dealing with those dual or multi-identities as well. And so that's a lot of work to put on the shoulders of somebody that's already experiencing multiple layers of marginalization. Also, DEI leaders rarely have the resources, positional power, and influence to lead real change. And so if this is important to business, just like a new product launch or service launch or new strategic approach, you would invest in it. Why is DEI being treated any differently? And the tenure is low. We know a lot of people, well-intentioned, to put out these, job roles and descriptions seeking DEI leaders with 10 plus years of experience leading DEI. Well, DEI is even a new acronym in the last few years. That wasn't even around 10 years ago. And for the longest time, chief diversity officers were only inside huge global organizations until the last 5-6 years that I've at least seen from my vantage point, having done this work for the last 8 years. And so when you think about why overtasking marginalized groups is a problem, and what we find is that we're more likely to experience microaggressions or non-inclusive behaviors. So when you think about a chief diversity officer, someone leading DEI in an organization, it's something like being interrupted, not getting credit for ideas, or people making assumptions about them that are inaccurate or harmful. So you're dealing with that experience, that lived experience, and you're taking on the brunt of the DEI work. That math doesn't quite add up from an energy level. The resource problem and the lack of power and influence is really deeply problematic. And I think this is the most systemic of the issues that we need to address today, is making sure that DEI work is valued, that it is compensated for. that it's prioritized, that it's embedded into the workplace culture. Think about the last time you launched a new product or strategic initiative and didn't fund it. That would be very silly. DEI is no different. So DEI leaders need to have a budget of which they're 100% accountable for, with specific goals and measurements to ensure those resources continue to be directed towards DEI. This isn't an on and off switch. It's cool. It's in the news. Let's pump up the DEI budget. It's not in the news. We're experiencing an economic downturn, or we have a short-term, business challenge. We turn it off. That really signals to people the sincerity or lack of sincerity on DEI long-term, because DEI, for it to work, requires a long-term, consistent, and intentional commitment. Redirecting efforts when things get hard suggests that it's honestly not that important at all. And I would think structurally, DEI really does need to report directly into the C-suite, oftentimes the CEO. If we don't have the ability to have the influence and the power associated with being a real leader inside an organization, it's hard to direct change when you're not a part of that C-suite or when you report in through HR. That's just really not a great idea to build in extra layers, because that limits the control and influence of the DEI person. So why is tenure low and burnout so high for DEI leaders? There's actually some research done by Deloitte that says 77% of folks say they've experienced burnout in their current job. But there's a stigma associated with burnout, and people are less likely to be more vocal and just leave the organization citing personal reasons or needs for flexibility instead of the real reason: discrimination, lack of sincerity around DEI. And when the tenure is just less than 2 years, you compare that to other senior leadership positions, that difference is noticeable. And I think this is something that we can do better on. Commit to DEI long-term, model workplace inclusion, ask leadership to take it seriously, expect it in performance reviews, make sure that you're addressing bias throughout the life cycle of the employees, from recruiting to hiring to promotions, gather data on diverse representations, on turnover, on engagement. And you will notice that the data tells a deeper story of why we're really not sustaining the long-term sustainable health of DEI leaders. So if you like this, check out the full article. It's in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you on other hot topics. Just send me a note at nextpivotpoint.com.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Allies are necessary for positive change. If you are on the journey to becoming an ally, we invite you to participate in our brand new Lead Like an Ally online program, or get a copy of our new book, Allyship in Action, available on Amazon. Both are helpful tools that meet leaders where they're at and help provide tools for professional and personal settings. Head over to nextpivotpoint.com to get started today.